it's painful, it's joyless, it's inefficient, it's not joined up, it's going backwards, and it's overly automated. As customers, we know that this is true. We know that there are certain sectors, insurance, transportation, utilities, where the customer service isn't as good as it used to be. And I use the word customer service, Natalie, deliberately. The customer doesn't talk about CX or UX or anything else. Customer journeys, they just say the service was rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Technology is meant to be an enabler, right? It's meant to augment the customer experience. But it's clear that for some retailers and I guess businesses more generally, they're still struggling to get that balance right. And I think it's interesting because, like, on the one hand, we are living in this on demand era where self service is everywhere. And, as much as I hate to generalize, it is very much being driven by the younger generations, the digitally native generations who just want to sort stuff out through an app. But then on the other hand, because so much of our lives is now being automated, I feel like this reinforces the need to do the opposite, to kind of, to shout when you're not using AI and to offer that human touch, that kind of connection. So what's your take on this, Peter? What's this sort of bifurcation that we're seeing, and where do you think we might be heading?
I mean, I think it's really easy to generalize about it and just say it's just the older people who are used to human contact and everybody else wants to self-serve. That's not been my experience. The most compelling stat in the data is that 68% of people, and this isn't just young people, would prefer to wait for good service than, give an instant bad service. And my feeling is that technology is very sexy. Technology is incredibly seductive, and service is very easy to underestimate as, oh, it's just being nice to people and it's the cute human stuff. But it's not. Service actually is the whole thing. And so much of the energy and the effort through technology, Natalie, has gone into making things faster to start with. It's all about making things faster and more efficient and so on. Sometimes we actually do want things to be slower, Technology has made us more anxious. And so much of the energy in business has gone into the front end, to selling, to ensuring we don't lose the sale, and not enough of the energy in business has gone into when things go wrong. And it's only when things go wrong, that your customer experience is truly tested by customers.
Yeah.
Because yes, they're really happy to self-serve and not speak to anybody when they're buying and when they're transacting. But when they're slowing down, when they're interacting, when things go wrong, that's when they want expertise. And it doesn't necessarily have to be human, but in the absence of technology that's able to truly fix the broken stuff, they then expect human.
Yeah. And you're right. It's when things go wrong. Those are the times we remember, right? We could have a perfectly fine, maybe not amazing, but just a perfectly fine experience where we get this, we walk into the store, we get the stuff we need, with the price is right, we walk out. But it, we won't necessarily remember that, but we will remember if we get to the checkout and there is a huge queue, or we'll remember if we get there and the one thing that we needed wasn't on the shelves. Like those are, I mean, I'm giving you a fairly simplistic example of maybe doing your weekly grocery shop, but it is when the things go wrong, and that can have a really detrimental impact on, customer loyalty and sort of perception of the brand. So I guess, yeah, I guess what would you recommend to retailers? Because in your book you talk about the golden rules and cardinal sins of service. So how do you deliver world-class service, and what are some of the things that brands should maybe avoid doing?
Customer service, customer experience is cultural. It starts from the top of the organization. It then influences every single decision because the leaders act and lead by example. They set their cultural default to yes, we'll have a go at that, rather than no. They lean in and run towards the customer if things go wrong, as opposed to running away and hiding. We met Steve Heapy, who's the chief executive of Jet2, which is now maybe not the world's favorite airline, but it's Britain's favorite airline, because unlike most airlines who hide when things go wrong, they either hide their phone number, so there's no way to contact them if they lose your baggage or the plane's delayed, or they hide in the airport. There's literally crouching underneath the desk, please don't talk to me. Jet 2, they put little jackets on, little red jackets, and there's 8 of them, and they literally swarm around the departure gates looking for problems. And they can't fix the delay, but they can fix your headspace, Natalie. And they can give you a bottle of water and say, someone's on the other end. And I think it's examples like that, all these chief executives, as to how they engage with customers, they communicate with customers, they treat complaints as gold dusted opportunities to fix the broken stuff rather than hiding them and they come with 10% of people that are unhappy and let's just focus on the 90%. And all of them pointed to this cultural aspect of customer experience as the single driver.
That's super interesting. And I actually had a question for kind of later on in our conversation, but it's so interesting that, you brought it up so early, and it just, I think, highlights the importance of it around culture and, what a customer obsessed culture really looks like in action. And I think you're right, that having that yes culture, like we'll give it a go. We're just going to throw stuff against the wall and see what works. We're not going to settle for the status quo. If there's a problem, we're going to be right there and resolving it. And really interesting to hear viewpoint from other sectors, because I also wanted to ask you about that, because I think sometimes retailers are so busy firefighting that they forget to kind of, just sort of pause and consider how their customers are behaving outside of their stores and the kind of experience they're getting when they're booking a flight or making a hair appointment or, checking into a hotel. So because technology is impacting us in so many ways. It's not just when we're, shopping online or shopping in stores, but when we're just kind of living our everyday lives. So what would you say we can learn? I mean, that was just a great example, but are there any other lessons for retailers looking outside of the retail sector?
I think, what you just said is interesting because we live in an expectation economy, which means that we no longer judge one brand against another brand in the same sector. We judge everything against everything. So one brand's new gold standard becomes everybody else's price of entry, price of admission, because if they can do that, why can't you do that? And the customer's constantly changing their expectations against other benchmarks in other sort of sectors. And I think, retail was so smashed up by the opportunity of online, because it put such a pressure on physical retail that I think the great retailers now have really started to understand that the different channels have very, very different objectives and meet very different human needs. Customers haven't changed. The way the needs are met have changed phenomenally beyond recognition, but our needs themselves haven't changed at all, really. We might want things a little faster or maybe even a little slower, but our needs haven't changed. So the start point in the book is let's just think about customer needs and segment them into basic needs that are the core stuff you've got to do just to, about transparency and courtesy and trust and all that kind of stuff. And then you go into transactional needs, which are the key things you need when you're transacting, largely digitally, through to interactional needs that you're largely going to meet in the physical world, and then your higher needs. The customer moves along what I call the lexicon of needs when they're dealing with businesses and talking to businesses. And we shift in between particularly transactional, interactional needs, depending on where we are in the journey, what kind of channel are we working in, who are we with, what kind of day is it, what we're shopping for. And we expect the business to understand whether we're transacting or interacting at every time. We expect the business to know what speed we wish to operate at. So I suppose the interesting thing for retail particularly is the opportunity that needs provide to influence what you do in your channels. I think once you see physical retail through the lens of very different customer needs, joy, connection, inspiration, deep expertise, multi-sensory experiences. You see physical retail very differently.
It's interesting because when we think about where online shopping is heading, I feel like it's heading more towards the things that it couldn't really do until now, which is, all the things you just laid out around physical retail, social connection, multi-sensory, all that stuff. I think that's the kind of final opportunity for online shopping, the kind of natural evolution, and something we talk about a lot on the podcast. And sort of interesting to see this convergence where physical retail is becoming more digitized, and then you've got digital retail becoming more immersive and personalized. And I guess as customers, our experiences are just continuously getting better. So, Peter, I want to ask you about customer centricity, because it's a word that comes up a lot in the industry. I can't think of one retailer that doesn't talk about being customer first or customer centric or customer obsessed. Um, how much of this is just industry jargon, and isn't customer centricity kind of implied these days? Because if you're not relevant to your customers, if you're not differentiating, if you're not offering value in some shape or form, then you're not going to have much of a business. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
I hate the word customer centrist. I banned it. I mean, I call the book Start with the Customer. Like literally in paragraph 2, I'm saying this is not about this is not about giving a customer a seat at the table, and everything we do is all about the customer, with a little kind of cute heart around it and a graphic that says we love our customers. Fundamentally, you either have a cultural default that truly listens to the customer, not just a bit of high level data, but that truly is obsessed with customers, that comes from the top and goes right the way through, or you don't. And often it comes down to who owns that. Who is the customer, the real customer champion that's ruthless and brutally honest in what the customer is thinking. Because the marketing director is now the chief customer officer, the natural answer must be them. But the marketing director is fundamentally about selling. That whole team is largely around selling, and is the new commercial team of the business. If it doesn't sit within the chief customer officer, and some of them are amazing, I'm not saying, but they've got a job to sell, then it's down to the chief exec, and if they are the chief customer champion, then everything's okay. But often they're not. That's maybe not their background. And therefore, owning the customer culture flops around between departments, and that's when you sort of get into real problems. And I don't know. I think it's really, really easy to use as a throwaway term, but I'm not convinced that it's the answer.
What about employee centricity? Because we talk a lot about customer centricity, but actually, I think the best retailers are those that are employee centric. Their staff are feeling empowered, they feel valued, there's a sense of trust, it's collaborative. And naturally, if you have a happy workforce, a happy front line, you're gonna have a great customer experience, right? And of course, I'd love to get your take on this, especially with your time at John Lewis and the whole partnership model. And what can retailers learn there, and how important is it to be employee centric?
I mean, it's a no-brainer that if you've had a hand in creating the customer experience, and you feel complicit in delivering the outcomes because you've had the idea yourself, you've been empowered, you've been enabled, you've been involved in the conversation, you're listened to, you have a voice, then you're going to want it to work.